The night in the alien jungle was alive with strange sounds. Insects with glowing wings buzzed between the thick leaves, their light flickering like sparks in the dark. The air smelled of smoke and wet earth. A great fire burned in the middle of a wide clearing, and around it the tribal aliens moved in circles. Their bodies were painted with ash and blood. Their chants rose and fell like thunder, deep voices shaking the trees. The flames stretched high, lighting the sharp teeth and wild eyes of those who danced around it. At the center of the fire circle, a young woman was tied to a tall wooden pole. Her wrists were bound with rough rope, and her skin was scratched and bruised from the struggle. Her long hair was tangled and clung to her face, but her eyes were wide with fear. She had screamed until her throat hurt, yet no one answered. The only response was the steady beating of alien drums, each strike like a countdown to her death. The aliens treated her like a prize for their gods. They shouted words in a language she did not understand, but their gestures told the meaning, clearly. They wanted the fire to take her, to burn her alive as part of their savage ritual. Every time the flames roared higher, the tribe cheered with excitement. Some threw strange herbs and powders into the blaze, making it spark green and blue. Shadows danced across the clearing, twisting into shapes that looked almost alive. The girl tried to fight against her ropes, but they only cut deeper into her skin. Tears blurred her vision. She thought of home, of people she would never see again. The heat of the fire licked her face and she felt her strength slipping away. The alien chief raised a staff carved from bone and lifted his voice above the others. At his command, the chanting grew louder, a storm of voices echoing through the jungle. The aliens began to lean closer, their eyes shining with hunger. Some reached toward the flames as if offering her soul to the fire. The girl cried out again, her voice breaking, but it was drowned by the roaring chant. Fear pressed against her chest, and for a moment she believed no one would come. This would be her end, far from home in the hands of creatures who saw her only as fuel for their gods. Then something shifted at the edge of the clearing. A shadow moved between the trees, quiet but steady. The aliens were too focused on their ritual to notice. The girl, through the blur of smoke and tears, saw it. A figure stepped forward, slow and deliberate. At first she thought it was another alien, but the shape was different. The height, the walk, the way the firelight caught on his face. It was not one of them. It was a man. Her heart skipped. A human, here, in the middle of this nightmare. He did not wear armor and no weapon gleamed in his hands, but there was something in his stance that froze her breath. He walked as if the fire belonged to him, as if the chants were nothing more than background noise. His eyes fixed on her, sharp and unshaken, and for a second she felt a surge of hope. The flames crackled higher, casting light across his figure. The aliens began to notice him now. Their chants stumbled, their movements paused. The chief lowered, his bone staff, confusion flashing across his painted face. Who was this man who dared step into their sacred circle? The drums faltered. The fire roared louder as if answering the silence. The girl stared at the stranger, her voice too weak to call out, yet he did not need her cry. His gaze spoke enough. He had come for her. The alien tribe shifted uneasily. Their eyes darted from the fire to the man, unsure whether to attack or wait. No human should have been here, deep in their jungle. Yet, one stood before them without fear. He did not break his stride. He walked straight into the clearing, the firelight painting his face in gold and shadow. The girl's heart pounded. Every step he took seemed heavier, louder, as if the earth itself recognized his arrival. The fire snapped, sending sparks into the night sky. The aliens hissed, baring their teeth, but none moved forward yet. The chief raised his staff again, his mouth opening to give an order. But the man's voice cut across the clearing before he could speak. It was strong, calm, and sharp like steel. Though the girl could not hear the exact words, she knew their meaning. He had come to stop them. He had come to save her. The aliens answered with a roar, their chants turning into angry cries. The circle tightened, Spears pointed at the lone man, yet he did not flinch. The fire burned brighter between them, casting long shadows that made the scene look like the battlefield of gods. And in that moment, as the jungle held its breath, the girl realized something. She was no longer alone. The fire still roared, but the chants of the aliens fell into uneasy silence. All eyes turned toward the figure who had dared to enter their circle. He was tall but not massive like the tribal aliens, his body lean and built for endurance rather than brute strength. His clothes were worn from travel, covered with dust and cuts from the wild jungle. Yet there was something in his stance that made him larger than life. He stood straight, shoulders squared, his gaze locked on the girl tied to the stake. The girl could barely breathe as she watched him. Hope sparked inside her chest, but fear pressed against it. What could one man do against so many creatures? Their teeth were sharp, their claws deadly, and their spears glimmered in the firelight. But the stranger did not show fear. He walked forward with steady steps, each one echoing louder than the drums that had stopped beating. The alien chief raised his staff high, his painted face twisted in anger. He barked out words in his rough tongue, pointing the staff at the man as if cursing him. The tribe shouted in reply, some slamming their spears into the ground, others hissing and growling like wild beasts. The fire cracked and spat sparks, throwing shadows across their monstrous forms. Still, the human did not stop. When he finally spoke, his voice was clear and calm. The words were human, but the tone was universal. It carried command, defiance, and warning. Even the aliens who could not understand his language felt the weight of it. The girl's heart raced faster as his words cut through the smoky air. He was not pleading. He was not begging for mercy. He was demanding. The aliens snarled in response. They moved closer, spears raised, circling him like predators closing in on prey. The girl pulled at her bonds, fear gripping her again. She wanted to scream at him to run, to save himself before it was too late. But he did not run. He looked at the spears, then back at the chief, and he stood his ground. One of the tribal warriors lunged forward, thrusting his spear toward the man's chest. With a sudden movement, the stranger shifted sideways. The spear stabbed only air, and before the warrior could react, the human's hand shot out, grabbing the shaft and twisting it. The alien stumbled, surprised at the strength hidden in this smaller figure. The man wrenched the spear free and turned it in his hands. The firelight flashed on the weapon, now in human grip. A ripple of shock moved through the tribe. They had expected weakness, yet the man moved with precision and skill. His eyes never wavered, his breathing steady. He pointed the spear back at the warrior, not as a threat but as a statement. Humanity was not prey. The girl's fear shifted into awe. This was no ordinary wanderer who had stumbled into the clearing. This was someone who had faced danger before. She could see it in the way he stood, the way his eyes scanned the tribe, calculating every movement. He was alone, but he carried himself like an army. The alien chief roared in fury. He slammed his staff against the ground, sending a shower of sparks upward. More warriors stepped forward, their fangs bared, claws ready to tear. The human tightened his grip on the spear. His jaw clenched, but his eyes stayed calm. He had made his choice the moment he stepped into the firelight. He was not leaving without her. The girl felt tears sting her eyes again, but this time they were not from fear. They were from something else. She did not know his name or why he had come, but in that moment she believed he would not let her die. The fire burned hot against her skin, the ropes cut deeper into her wrists, but hope spread inside her like a second flame. The circle of aliens began to close tighter, their growls rising once more. The jungle itself seemed to tremble under their cries. The man lifted the spear, his body shifting into a stance of defense. His shadow stretched across the fire, long and sharp like the blade of a weapon. The chief pointed his staff at the girl, shouting the order to finish the ritual. The warriors roared, ready to strike, but the human took a step forward instead of back. His voice rose again, stronger, sharper, filled with a force that even the fire could not match. The aliens faltered for just a heartbeat, their advance slowing as they felt the weight of his defiance. The girl's heart pounded so hard it hurt. The air was thick with smoke, with fear, with the promise of violence. She knew the next moment would decide everything. Would the fire consume her? Or would the stranger's courage burn brighter than the flames of the ritual? The fire cracked. Like thunder, and the night held its breath. The clearing glowed with fire, shadows stretching across the trees like monsters of smoke. The alien tribe tightened their circle around the human, their chants returning, louder and sharper, like the growl of wild beasts ready to strike. Yet, in the middle of the chaos, the man stood tall, holding the stolen spear as if it had always belonged to him. His gaze never left the girl, but his stance warned the tribe that any who tried to reach her would pay a price. The alien chief stepped forward. His body was marked with glowing paint, symbols of authority and power. In his hands, the bone staff tapped against the ground, each strike echoing like thunder. His eyes glared at the human with fury and disbelief. To the chief, this was no warrior, only a thin creature daring to challenge an entire tribe. To the man, this was no tribe of gods, only a band of killers dressed in ritual. The girl watched with her breath caught in her chest. She could not understand the words shouted by the aliens, but she felt the meaning. The chief was daring the human to submit, to kneel, to surrender the fight before it began. The tribe expected him to bow, as all prey did before the fire. The man answered not with a bow, but with a step forward. He planted his feet in the dirt, raised the spear, and locked eyes with the chief. His body spoke the truth his words did not need to carry. He would not kneel. A roar broke out among the warriors. Spears rattled together, claws scraped the air, teeth bared in the firelight. The air trembled with their fury. The jungle animals fled deeper into the dark, sensing blood. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, praying that this human would not be swallowed by the wave of violence that was about to fall on him. The first alien warrior lunged again, this time faster. His spear thrust with deadly precision. The human twisted aside, his movements sharp and quick, his body fueled not by size but by instinct. He swung the spear in a wide arc, striking the warrior across the chest. The alien stumbled back with a roar of pain, the crowd hissing in shock. The stranger's blow had not killed, but it had broken the illusion of invincibility. The girl's eyes flew open. She saw not weakness in him, but skill, a kind of strength that was not measured in muscle, but in spirit. Every motion carried purpose, every strike carried the weight of survival. The chief shouted again, and two more warriors leapt forward together. Spears cut through the air, but the human dropped low, rolling under the strikes. He rose to his feet in the same breath, driving his stolen spear into the ground at an angle. The tip blocked the path of the second warrior, forcing him off balance. With his free hand, the human struck the first warrior across the jaw, sending him staggering back. The crowd roared louder, their rage mixing with disbelief. The firelight showed their faces twisted between fury and fear. The human did not look like a predator, yet he fought like one. He had no armor, no shield, yet he moved with the focus of a survivor who had nothing left to lose. The girl felt her hope grow stronger. The ropes cut her skin, the heat burned her face, but her heart beat faster with new strength. She could see it now. This was not just a fight for her life. This was a clash of belief, of cultures, of wills. The aliens believed in domination and sacrifice, in taking life for power. The human believed in something else, something the girl could not yet name but could feel in her bones. The chief stepped forward at last, slamming his staff into the dirt so hard the ground shook. The fire flared higher, as if answering his command. The warriors drew back, forming a wider circle, leaving the human standing alone across from their leader. The drums began again, deep and slow, marking the rhythm of a duel. The man tightened his grip on the spear. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths. The girl could see the sweat on his brow, the dirt on his skin, the raw determination in his eyes. He was one against many, yet in that moment it looked as though he carried all of humanity with him. The chief snarled, lifting his staff like a weapon, its jagged bone edges glinting in the firelight. The human lifted the spear, his stance firm, ready. The fire roared, the drums thundered, and the night froze in the moment before violence. The fire snapped with a burst of sparks, and the drums pounded like thunder in the alien night. The chief stepped into the circle. his bone staff raised high, glowing paints across his body shining in the flames. The tribe howled as if calling on their gods. The human tightened his grip on the stolen spear and set his feet into the dirt. Around them, the jungle waited, holding its breath. The girl pressed against the ropes, her eyes wide. Every heartbeat seemed louder than the drums. She could see the sweat sliding down the man's neck, yet his eyes remained steady. He was smaller than the chief, weaker by size, but in that moment he looked unbreakable. The chief lunged first. His staff swung down with crushing force, aimed to smash the human into the ground. The man stepped aside, the staff striking dirt where he had stood a second before. The shock of the blow rattled the earth, dust rising into the firelight. The human countered quickly, thrusting the spear forward. The chief twisted, the sharp bone edges of his staff meeting the spear with a loud crack. Sparks of fire reflected on their weapons as they clashed. The tribe cheered wildly, their voices echoing through the jungle. Some stamped their feet, others pounded their spears against the earth. The sound was like a storm, trying to shake the human's focus. Yet he pushed forward, striking again, forcing the chief to step back. For the first time, the alien leader showed surprise. The fight grew faster. Staff against spear, strike against block, each movement heavy with the weight of survival. The fire's heat wrapped around them, the smoke rising high as if the flames themselves wanted to watch. The girl's breath caught with every swing, every close call. She could not cry out, only watch as the human fought for both their lives. The chief snarled, his voice rising in challenge. He spun the staff in a wide arc, aiming for the man's head. The human ducked low, rolling across the dirt, then leapt up again with the spear in both hands. He drove it forward with all his strength, the tip grazing the chief's side. A line of blood glowed against the alien's painted skin. The tribe hissed in shock, their confidence breaking for a moment. The human did not celebrate. He knew this. Fight was far from over. His chest rose and fell with deep breaths, his muscles burning, yet his eyes held the same fire as the flames beside him. The chief roared, more beast than leader now, and came at him again with savage power. This time the staff slammed against the spear, knocking it from the man's hands. The weapon spun across the dirt, landing near the girl's feet. She gasped, her heart dropping. The tribe roared in triumph, their voices deafening. The human was unarmed, but he did not fall back. He lifted his fists, standing firm even without the spear. The chief charged, swinging his staff down again. The man sidestepped, caught the staff with both hands, and pulled with sudden force. The chief staggered, caught off balance. The human used the moment to strike with his elbow, driving it into the alien's jaw. The sound cracked through the clearing. The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat. The fire burned louder, the drums stopped, and the chief stumbled back. The man bent, snatched the spear from the ground, and stood tall once more. His chest heaved, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, but his eyes burned with victory. The girl's hope surged. She pulled harder at her ropes, her wrists bleeding, desperate to break free. She could see it now. This man was not only fighting to save her life. He was fighting to prove something greater, that humanity could never be broken. The chief spat blood, his eyes blazing with rage. He raised his staff again, but this time the tribe did not cheer as loudly. Doubt spread among them. Their godlike leader was bleeding, staggering, challenged by a single human who refused to die. The man and the chief circled each other, firelight dancing on their faces. Every muscle in the human's body ached, but he did not show it. He waited, calm, his grip firm on the spear. The chief roared and rushed forward, but this time the man was ready. He stepped inside the swing of the staff, driving the spear's tip across the alien's chest in a powerful strike. The blow cut deep, the paint smearing red with blood. The chief staggered back, his roar breaking into a scream of fury. The tribe howled in shock, their belief shaking. The fire blazed higher as if feeding on the chaos. The girl's eyes filled with tears. She had seen hopelessness turn into defiance, defiance turn into survival. The human was standing against everything, and for the first time she believed he might win. The clearing shook with noise, the fire roared like a beast, and the battle, Under the firelight raged on, carrying them all to the edge of destiny. The fire raged higher, swallowing the night sky with waves of heat. Sparks drifted like burning stars and smoke twisted into the jungle trees. The alien chief staggered, blood streaking his painted chest. His staff hung heavy in his hands, yet his fury burned hotter than the flames. Across from him the human stood with the spear, dirt clinging to his skin, sweat dripping down his face. His chest heaved with exhaustion, but his eyes held no surrender. The tribe roared, their voices shaking the ground, urging their leader to crush the intruder. The drums beat again, a furious rhythm that matched the thundering of the girl's heart. She was still bound to the wooden post, her skin burning from the heat of the fire creeping closer. Her throat was dry, her body weak, but her spirit clung to one fragile thread of hope. That man was fighting for her, risking everything against impossible odds. The chief gave a final roar and charged forward. His staff swung with deadly force, cutting the air like a blade. The human blocked with the spear, wood and bone cracking together. The impact shuddered through his arms, but he did not fall. He twisted the spear low, catching the chief across the legs. The alien stumbled, dropping to one knee. The crowd gasped in disbelief. With a surge of strength, the human struck again, the spear tip slashing across the chief's arm. The staff dropped from his grip and rolled into the dirt. The firelight revealed the truth. The mighty leader had been beaten back. The tribe froze in silence, their chants dying into whispers. The human did not waste time. He turned from the fallen chief and ran straight toward the girl. His steps pounded against the dirt, his eyes locked on hers. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. No one had ever come for her, yet here he was, racing through the circle of stunned warriors. Some aliens moved to block him, but hesitation held their feet. Their leader lay broken, their faith shaken. The man shoved one aside with the shaft of his spear, ducked another strike, and pushed through. He reached the post where the girl was bound, the fire blazing dangerously close to her skin. Her breath caught as he dropped the spear and pulled at the ropes. His hands were rough, his strength desperate. The fibers cut into his skin, but he yanked harder. The girl winced as the rope dug deeper. Then with a final pull, it snapped apart. Her arms fell free, shaking and weak. The human caught her before she collapsed. Smoke stung their eyes, the flames roaring higher, as if angry to lose their sacrifice. The tribe screamed in rage, their shock breaking into fury. Spears rattled, voices rose, the ground shook with their cries. "Run," he said, his voice raw but steady. She could not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her away from the post. He snatched the spear again and held it ready, protecting her with every step. The fire crackled, reaching for them, but he pulled her out of its grasp. Together they stumbled across the clearing. The aliens surged forward now, their fear replaced with bloodlust. Yet the man kept moving, forcing a path through the chaos. He struck with the spear when needed, but never slowed. His only focus was to take her away from the flames. The girl clung to him, her body trembling, her breath shallow. Her wrists bled from the ropes, her face pale from smoke, but her heart beat with fierce hope. She was no longer alone. Behind them, the alien chief rose weakly, blood running down his arm. His roar carried across the clearing, ordering his tribe to attack. Warriors charged, their spears gleaming in the firelight. The human turned, lifting the spear with one arm while holding the girl close with the other. His stance was unbroken, even as dozens of enemies closed in. The flames behind him painted his figure in golden shadow, as if the fire itself recognized his defiance. The tribe slowed, fear flickering again. They had seen their leader fall. They had seen this human carve his way through their circle. Now they watched him stand tall, holding the girl they had claimed for death. For a heartbeat, silence held the jungle. The fire hissed, the drums fell still, and even the wind seemed to pause. The girl leaned against him, her voice a whisper of gratitude that needed no words. Then he stepped back into the shadows of the jungle, pulling her with him. The clearing erupted in chaos, the tribe screaming, chasing, the fire roaring louder than ever. But the girl and the human were gone from its circle, running into the dark where hope waited. That night, The flames of the alien ritual failed to take a life. Instead, they witnessed something stronger. A rescue written in fire, a moment carved into memory, where one human chose to face death and proved that humanity never turns away. The jungle swallowed them as they ran, thick branches tearing at their skin, roots rising from the earth like traps. The night was alive with noise, the cries of the alien tribe echoing behind them, spears rattling, drums beating in the distance. The firelight faded, but the danger only grew. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a warning. The human kept one arm around the girl, pulling her forward with steady strength. His breath was heavy, yet his pace did not falter. The spear in his other hand cut through vines and branches, clearing a path where none seemed to exist. The girl stumbled often, her legs weak from fear and exhaustion, but each time she felt herself falling, his grip tightened, lifting her forward again. Behind them, the tribe gave chase. Their roars shook the trees, their steps thundered across the jungle floor. The girl could hear them closing in, could feel the ground trembling beneath their fury. She clung to the man's side, her heart pounding so loud she thought it would give them away. The wilderness itself fought against them. Thick mud clung to their feet, slowing every step. Sharp thorns tore at their clothes and skin. Strange, glowing insects darted past, lighting the path for a second before vanishing into the dark. Somewhere far off, a beast howled, its deep voice carrying hunger. The girl's breath shook in her chest, but the man only pressed on, his face set with fierce determination. They reached a slope covered in wet moss. The man pushed the girl ahead of him, guiding her hand to a root to pull herself upward. She slipped, her foot sliding, but he caught her quickly, lifting her higher until she scrambled to the top. Then he climbed after her, his movements sure, despite the exhaustion burning in his muscles. At the top of the slope, the jungle opened into a dense thicket. The man pulled her into the shadows and pressed a finger to his lips. The girl's breath trembled, but she nodded, understanding his signal. Together they crouched low, hidden beneath leaves as the sounds of the alien tribe drew closer. Through the branches, they saw them. Dozens of warriors, painted in fire marks, stormed through the jungle with spears raised. Their glowing eyes scanned the dark, their growls carrying hunger for blood. They moved fast, following the broken trail left behind. The girl's heart hammered against her ribs, her body begging her to run again, but the man's steady hand on her shoulder kept her still. The aliens passed close, their shadows moving like beasts in the firelight of their torches. The girl held her breath, afraid even a whisper of sound would betray them. The man did not move, his body still as stone, his eyes sharp as a predator's. Only when the last warrior's footsteps faded into the distance did he rise again, pulling her gently to her feet. They moved deeper into the wilderness, farther from the fire and the chance, but closer to the unknown dangers of the jungle. The girl leaned against him often, her strength nearly gone, but he never slowed. Each step was a promise, each breath a vow. He had chosen to save her, and he would not stop until she was safe. The night stretched long, filled with chase and silence, with hidden dangers and close escapes. Once, they crossed a river glowing with strange light, the water alive with alien fish that snapped at their feet. Once they heard the cries of winged creatures above, their shadows circling like predators waiting for weakness. Yet through it all, the man led, never letting go of her hand. At last, when the jungle grew quiet and the drums faded into nothing, he guided her to a hollow beneath the roots of a massive tree. The space was small but sheltered, hidden from the open night. He lowered her gently to the ground, his eyes scanning the shadows for signs of pursuit. Only when he was certain they were safe did he finally allow himself to breathe deeply. The girl looked at him through the dim light. His face was tired, lined with dirt and blood, yet his eyes still burned with the same fire that had carried him into the circle of death. She reached for his arm, her voice weak but filled with gratitude. She could not speak his language, but she whispered the only word her heart could form. "Thank you." He did not answer with words. Instead, he gave a single nod, his eyes softening. For the first time, Then he leaned back against the roots, the spear across his lap, listening to the night. The girl rested her head against his shoulder, her body trembling less now, her fear replaced by the fragile warmth of safety. The alien jungle still waited outside, filled with dangers, but in that hidden hollow beneath the roots, a small fire burned in both their hearts. It was not the fire of ritual or sacrifice, it was the fire of survival, the fire of humanity refusing to be broken. The jungle was quiet at last. No drums, no chanting, no roar of alien warriors. Only the whisper of leaves and the low hum of strange insects filled the night air. Beneath the roots of the great tree, the girl and the human sat close together, hidden from the eyes of those who hunted them. The fire of the alien ritual was far behind, yet its heat and terror still lingered in her mind. Her body trembled from exhaustion, her wrists raw from the ropes that had bound her. She could still feel the fire's heat on her skin, could still hear the crackle of flames rising toward her. She turned her head toward the man beside her. He sat upright, the spear across his knees, his eyes scanning the dark with unbroken focus. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but his face showed no fear, only quiet strength. She whispered again, her voice hoarse, "Thank you." The human turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers. He did not speak for a moment. Then, he gave a small nod, his gaze softening before returning to the shadows around them. His silence said more than words could. He had chosen to save her, not for reward, not for glory, but because it was the only choice his heart would allow. The girl pressed her hands against the earth, trying to steady herself. She wanted to ask him why. Why had he risked his life against an entire tribe? Why had he stepped into the fire when no one else had come for her? She searched his face, hoping for an answer, and in his calm eyes she saw it. Humanity could never turn away from cruelty. The night stretched on, filled with the sounds of distant creatures. Once, a roar echoed far away, sending flocks of birds screaming into the air. Once, the rustle of heavy footsteps made them hold their breath until the danger passed. Yet through it all the man remained steady, his presence like a shield between her and the endless dangers of the wild. When dawn began to break, light spilled through the jungle canopy, painting the leaves in gold. The girl shifted weakly, leaning against him. Her body was tired, but her spirit felt stronger than it had in days. She looked at the man again, studying him in the light of morning. His skin was cut and bruised, his clothes torn, his hands rough, with blood from the fight. Yet there was something in him that seemed untouched, unbroken, as if his will alone kept him standing. She reached out, touching his arm gently. He looked down at her, and she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Why did you come for me?" The human's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment he seemed to search for the right words. Then he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Because no one deserves to burn." The girl's eyes filled with tears. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of everything he had done. He had faced death, fought warriors, defied a tribe, all because he refused to let her suffer. It was not duty, not destiny, but something greater. It was the spirit of humanity, the will to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. She leaned her head against his shoulder, closing her eyes. For the first time, the fear inside her began to fade. The jungle was still dangerous, the tribe might return, yet she felt safe. Safe because of him. Safe because humanity had chosen not to walk away. The man looked out into the rising sun, his grip on the spear tightening. He knew the fight was not over. The tribe would hunt them again, the wilderness would test them, but none of it mattered. He had saved her once, and he would save her again if needed, because that was what humanity did. As the light grew stronger, the girl whispered again, her voice filled with fragile hope. "You are my hero." The man did not answer with words. He only stood, offering his hand to help her rise. She took it, her fingers curling around his, and together they stepped out of the hollow into the morning light. The jungle stretched before them, wild and endless, but they walked forward side by side. The girl glanced at him once more, her heart swelling with gratitude and awe. She knew her life had been saved not just by his strength but by something deeper, something the aliens could never understand. Humanity was more than flesh and blood. Humanity was defiance, courage, and the refusal to turn away from another's suffering. And as they vanished into the green shadows of the wilderness, the fire of the alien ritual faded into memory, replaced by a brighter flame. A flame that carried hope. A flame that proved why, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, humanity could never be ignored.